Welcome back to the DC Animated Universe retrospective. This time we're tackling the third and final season of Superman the Animated Series. I really don't have much to tell in regards to this video's opening since there's no format change, no flashy new intro, none of that. What I can tell you about Superman the Animated Series Season 3 is that it is, like I said last time, the first season we're looking at to have been done after TNBA, which if you're keeping track at home, is the best season we've looked at up to this point. Season 1 of STAS was a smashing start to the series, but Season 2 stumbled because of how it didn't really do a whole lot new, since things I found impressive before had stopped being that way. If I could describe this season just by going off of my memory of it from nearly 5 years ago now, it would be that Superman Season 3 has some serious balls and is going to shatter our expectations, but you'll be glad it happened after the fact. Is every episode going to be perfect? No. In fact, I don't think there will ever be a perfect season, but that's not important. Will STAS Season 3, after having seen it with a fresh set of eyes, live up to my memory of it and finally be that TNBA killer I've been on the hunt for ever since? Well, I see no better way to find out than by diving into Episode 1, Warrior Queen. All things considered, this is a pretty well-paced episode. We start on an alien planet called Almerac, where the Queen, Maxima, has potential husbands battle her to determine their worth. She's established as a capable fighter against Decene. Maxima finds out about Superman and decides that he's going to be the next candidate as she teleports to Earth. Decene then takes command of Almerac, and it was at this time that I had predicted the whole rest of the episode. I'm not upset, since being predictable isn't a problem in and of itself, it just has to be entertaining. Which Warrior Queen does pretty well as Maxima destroys property in an attempt to find Superman and looks cross-eyed when she finally finds him. While they fight, an old lady keeps reacting to it, and I just love the quick wit.
Here on Earth, marriage isn't something you can command. Marriage is a willing partnership where husbands and wives share the decisions and sacrifices.
What planet is he from?
Maxima doesn't care and captures Superman anyway. Keep a running tally of every time Superman gets electrocuted in this season. It's a crazy amount of times. Decene has already won over Almerac, since evidently the people don't like Maxima very much, and this includes her servant, Zazu, who stands up to Maxima, only to get betrayed by Decene in a few seconds. At first, I thought it was silly for Zazu to go from being against Maxima to begging her for forgiveness as the two of them plus Superman get locked up, but I like how Superman, despite wanting absolutely nothing to do with this, still tries to help Maxima be a better leader by convincing her not to kill Zazu. Then this cliche thing happens.
We should move before the Carnarite hears us.
I'm betting that's the Carnarite.
At first, I thought this Carnite chase was going to be pretty stupid, and while it is just filler, I like how Superman uses the electrified ceiling established earlier in the episode to kill the thing, thus deactivating the field. It's the little details that count for me. I haven't talked much about action scenes in STAS, especially in comparison to BTAS, where I cataloged how much better it got from the very beginning to the very end, and that is because STAS action's never anything too special. It's always great to see Superman give the big bad guys some comeuppance, but usually goons are quickly dealt away with, and big robots and such tend not to be the most interesting fights to watch. Again, STAS's biggest strength in my eyes is the character interaction and the dialogue, but for what it's worth, I think the ending fight in this episode is pretty well done as Decene gets put down a peg. In the end, Superman goes home, but he believes that with Maxima's newfound conscience for her people, she may just find someone more her speed one day.
Get that fragging, scum-sucking, rat-scratching Decene, and nobody better stop me.
Good work, guys. Good work. I'm actually glad that Lobo was just a cameo since we got so much of him in The Main Man Part 1 and 2 in Season 1, but it's good to acknowledge that he's still out there in the universe. But it's also best not to keep him in the forefront since we got most of the mileage out of him already. But beyond that, Warrior Queen is definitely not an episode for the ages or anything, but for what it is, I liked it. Good cast of characters, a few good action scenes, Superman's taken out of his element, which is always nice to see, and that's about it. But it's finally time to kick off the main plot of this season when Darkseid finally comes to Earth in Episode 2 and Episode 3, Apokolips Now. I know this episode has an exclamation mark in the title as well as a space between the words, but to make it easier, I'm just going to call it Apokolips Now. As I mentioned just now, the importance of this episode is hard to put into words, but I think I'll sum it up like this. Episodes like these don't happen particularly often, but when they do, you can just tell. What I mean is an episode or movie where you can clearly see that every single person involved, whether it be the writers, storyboards, animation, voice direction, voice actors, composers, etc., wanted it to be a special event. Something to be remembered amongst all the other episodes. Examples include Two-Face, Heart of Ice, Beware the Grey Ghost, Robin's Reckoning, Almost Got Him, Mask of the Phantasm, The Last Son of Krypton, World's Finest, Mad Love, and so on. The story starts with the SCU, specifically Dan Turpin and Maggie Sawyer having successfully stopped Intergang in their latest crime, with the first 30 seconds or so being this shot of the SCU on the highway. I really like the music here, but there'll be plenty of examples to pick from later. This moment of victory does not last long though, since in case you forgot, Intergang is run by Darkseid and his people on Apokolips as a giant alien tank crashes through the wall, blows up entire cars in an attempt to get the money back. In the process, Maggie almost dies in the explosion, with Turpin livid over it.
Maggie, I swear I'll find those filthy creeps.
Superman tries to stop the tank as well, but it uses this sonic disruptor that is so powerful that glass on several buildings for blocks is completely shattered, and even Superman's ear is bleeding before the thing shut down. This is the kind of weaponry that Darkseid just has at his disposal. You'll see why by the end of this episode, but they really wanted to make Turpin a hero here. He was great in his first appearance in Season 1 where he learned to trust Superman, and from that point forward, Superman mainly dealt with Maggie more often than Turpin, but Turpin was usually there for the big events, and I always liked seeing him. But again, this episode is his absolute best. It turns out that Darkseid was not responsible for getting all that money back from the SCU. Darkseid has sent Bruno Mannheim back to Earth to lead Intergang while under his command. We just saw how much devastation Intergang left behind while trying to get the money, and despite that, the power and ambition of Darkseid is shown off since he considers that whole thing a waste of time and promptly punishes Mannheim from halfway across the galaxy.
Understand each other. Good. Serve me well, Mannheim, and I'll make you a king.
The first half of part 1 is mostly dedicated to setting the stage with scenes like this. We can tell something's coming, but it's right around the corner. At a press event, Turpin announces his resolve to fight off whatever's coming, and I just love the line delivery from everyone. A boom tube appears, and out comes some other alien-looking guy, and man, this episode just nails the small details. Superman has seen these boom tubes before and knows that every time it means somebody from Apokolips is here to cause trouble, so when everyone else is running in terror, Superman, as Clark Kent, is just standing there, ready for action. But it turns out that this guy is actually here to warn Superman about what's coming, which prompts Superman, Hamilton, and Turpin to take him to Star Labs to heal his wounds. The guy's name is Orion, and what comes next is a giant exposition dump. I mean, Orion literally uses a mother box to show a PowerPoint of information. But exposition is oftentimes necessary in a story to get the ball rolling, but since Superman, Hamilton, and Turpin, and so on are all clueless as to what they're really up against, and the audience is as well, I think it's warranted. This exposition seems also really well done with dramatic music. There was once a single planet that was split into two, the peaceful, futuristic heaven that is New Genesis, led by Highfather, which symbolically speaking is no different than, say, Heaven or Mount Olympus. A perfect metropolis high above the natural world which is still beautiful at the same time. The sister planet, Apokolips, is the exact opposite side of that coin. A miserable wasteland led by Darkseid as his chained up slaves must work 24/7 to erect statues in his image, with parademons patrolling the area. It just looks miserable. Highfather, Darkseid, New Genesis, and Apokolips, it's all very obvious symbolism for heaven, hell, God, the devil, and so on, but I mean, it gets the point across. Darkseid's an evil douchebag in his never-ending quest to control the universe. When it comes to the DCAU and its gradual expansion, this is an area STAS excels in. BTAS could never get away with this sort of thing. Here we are in STAS though, and we have shown what the DCAU is like on a more cosmic scale, since yes, Earth is still a core part of the show, but we still see more grandiose ideas in STAS than in BTAS. JL continues to expand our knowledge of the universe, blending the style from B and STAS to make a beautiful package. But that's neither here nor there. Given their clashing styles, New Genesis and Apokolips have been at war for centuries, but after a countless amount of bloodshed, as a sign of peace, Darkseid and Highfather traded their infant sons to one another. Again, watch and listen to this scene. Despite the war being over, this has not stopped Darkseid as he's continued conquering world after world, searching for the anti-life equation, a formula so powerful that he could rule the universe in a matter of seconds with trillions of slaves made in an instant. He mentally feeds off of this suffering. This is not particularly deep motive, but the thing is, as an unstoppable force of nature ruling through oppression, I think it makes reasonable sense. You're just not supposed to relate to Darkseid at all. He wants to see the universe burn and has the time, the need, the will, the want, and the means to do so. Back to the story at hand. Orion reveals that the one tank that nearly wiped out the SCU at the beginning and beat Superman was only the beginning. Right on cue, Senate Air Force Base is attacked by a whole legion of Apokolips tanks, and just like the SCU, the Air Force does really not stand a chance against them, and it was at this point that I had to write in my notes how cinematic this season feels because of the music, the shots. It just feels like a war.
Locked on target. Fire!
Make no mistake, without Orion, the battle would be far more devastating since even Superman is outmatched here. In fact, the other issue I do have with this scene is that nobody dies. That sounds morbid, but you would hope for more casualties if a war scene is to have full impact. This is not the Ratchet movie or anything, just something I would have liked. Darkseid's not concerned with Orion saving the day since he is ready for part 2 of the plan as Mannheim and some parademons take over the nuclear power plant. But before we find out what they're up to, we cut back to the ruins of the Air Force Base as Orion knows Darkseid's capable of much worse and can tell this was only a distraction. He knows because he's Darkseid's son that was given to Highfather, and now it's his mission to stop Darkseid before he finds the anti-life equation. Orion leaves to tell Highfather about Darkseid's attacks, meaning that now it's all up to Superman, Turpin, and the SCU to save the day. Now, Darkseid has been very passive up to this point. I mean, he had Kanto do his bidding in Tools of the Trade when they first worked with Mannheim and Intergang. We saw the influence he has over his subjects in Father's Day when his Omega beams can literally make you a slave in seconds, and how everyone walked in fear of him. But it's time for him to really do something. In one of my favorite scenes so far, Mannheim finishes overloading the power plant, and remember how I just said this episode shied away from casualties just now? And that seems like a contradiction of my opening statement about how this season will really push the envelope. Well, remember how Darkseid promised Mannheim he was going to be a king earlier? Take a look at this.
You have served me well, Mr. Mannheim. And now, farewell.
Huh? But Gibbs, what about me? You promised you'd make me a king!
And so you are, the king of fools.
Darkseid? Darkseid! No!
The scene even shows Mannheim try to make an escape and he almost succeeds, but the generator cannot be stopped, ending Apokolips Now, Part 1 with the death of Bruno Mannheim.
Holy Hannah.
Orion was right. It isn't over.
We technically didn't see anyone die just now, but it has been confirmed that yes, that was his death, and Darkseid is totally capable of that, all the while with a smile on his face. Need I remind you that he can set people up like this from a hologram projection? Darkseid's actually coming to Earth in Part 2. So, the purpose of that generator that Mannheim sent off was that it was going to not only create a nuclear gas cloud over Metropolis, but it's going to dig into the Earth's core and turn Earth into an exact replica of Apokolips with the fires spewing out from within the planet. Speaking of Apokolips, Darkseid forbids Kalibak from going to Earth again after his embarrassing loss to Superman at Father's Day, so instead he sends Steppenwolf to face Superman, aka the terrible villain from the Justice League movie, but since he's just a henchman to fight in the middle of this episode, I'll take it over being the main antagonist. So Superman decides that in order to stop the burn holes from reaching the Earth's core, he needs to reach the seafloor, or the lake floor, whatever it is, and tear a hole in it to get the water to overflow before the flames get down there. Sounds like quite the task. Probably isn't even remotely possible in real life, but
What are you gonna do?
to make matters more difficult, Steppenwolf arrives with an armada of parademons at his beck and call. This scene is amazing. I mean, we have just never seen this kind of intensity from Superman before. From the angry face, to the fact that he uses his heat vision to a parademon's forehead to get him off. The satisfying sound effects, what have you. Just watch this part where Lois tries to save Superman as more and more parademons come and dogpile on him. And putting their hands in his mouth. But right in the nick of time, Turpin comes back to save the day. By distracting Steppenwolf and the parademons, he gives Superman enough time to stop the burn holes, but I can talk about Superman in a second. This is Turpin's best scene in the whole series. I mean, the SCU is there with him, but they're all faceless officers. Turpin is here in his suit and tie, blasting parademons with no second thought, since he's not gonna let these aliens take over the world. Also, Lois and Jimmy are here covering the story, but they don't play a big part in this episode. Just wanted to mention that they're here. But back to Superman, he pulls off one of his most heroic acts in the series as the triumphant music kicks in. He finally decides to rest for a minute after everything that's just happened, but Darkseid appears before him. If you want to talk about building your villain up, I mean, there is no fight scene here. Darkseid just blasts Superman with his Omega beams, tearing through the costume, with the only chance Superman has to make it out of this unscathed would be to join with Darkseid. We obviously know Superman's not going to do this, but it was merely used as an opportunity to set up the series finale with this line.
Still, if you won't be my knight, you will be my pawn.
The next scene doesn't even have music as we see Maggie and her friend in the hospital watching the end of the world happen before their eyes. Cut back to Dan Turpin getting a wounded SCU trooper to safety while still fighting these parademons with his bare hands. That is until the final act where a massive city street-wide tank arrives, tearing through cars with the perfect set dressing on top.
I am power, unlike any you have known. Absolute, infinite, and unrelenting. You have no choice but to prepare for a long, dark future as my subjects and my slaves.
In a pig's eye!
And while the people rebelling against Darkseid seems like it's obvious, I don't know, it's just an enjoyable scene to watch. And again, Turpin is great in this.
I don't care how many crummy planets you've conquered, you ain't getting this one! Yeah.
Caliban attacks Superman, and it's almost poetic how good this part is. I mean, here I was complaining about how padded and boring Father's Day was to the watch in the last season, but the writers almost made up for it by having Superman knock his ass out in one hit.
That's one for the home team.
Before we can get our epic Darkseid vs Superman fight, Orion finally returns, with the entire New Genesis Armada with him as Highfather has declared Earth under his protection, meaning it's off limits for Darkseid. It's really interesting to see how Darkseid seemingly has no morals, and yet he signed a peace treaty with New Genesis and is going to honor this and decides to leave Earth alone. Honestly, it makes me kind of afraid of Highfather. I mean, Darkseid doesn't want to mess with this guy after all. But you might be thinking that Darkseid going through all this trouble throughout Superman's seasons 1 and 2 only to go home might seem anticlimactic, but trust me, he's not going to let Superman think he's won the day and is going to leave his mark.
But remember, victory has its price.
Murderer!
Leaving us with the final scene as the major characters have gathered here for the funeral of Dan Turpin, and that includes Lex and Mercy, I might add. Originally when this episode aired, it had a bunch of characters from Marvel Comics here too, because when this episode was made, a very influential man in the comic book world, Jack Kirby, had passed away, with the characters he created in attendance. As to not get in trouble, when this episode was re-released, they just replaced Marvel characters with generic extras, but still, powerful scene regardless. With one final line from Superman to close it out.
Goodbye, old friend. In the end, the world didn't really need a Superman. Just a brave one.
That's just how it ends. Dan Turpin's not coming back. He was reduced to ash in a matter of seconds by Darkseid, and that's just it. This is a first, by the way. Sure, villains die every now and again, but Dan Turpin is the first time a main character has just been executed in the DCAU to never return. Yeah, BTAS is the most mature thing since Citizen Kane, I know, but nothing like this ever happened in BTAS or TNBA. The one time it did was a dream. Did I remind you that this was airing on Saturday morning? I can expand upon this once we've finished the entire season, but I will just say in summary that this is why I don't care for the "it's just for kids" argument. Superman Season 3 is not afraid of these moments, and it's all the better for it. More importantly, that was Apokolips Now. So far, I think this was the best episode the series has ever done. I just talked about the shocking finale, but the ride there was so well done with stakes higher than ever before, amazing cinematography, excellent sound design in both music and sound effects, the voice actors all unanimously turned in great performances, the script, the story, it was all just simply amazing. I was considering just doing this episode first and putting Warrior Queen after, since I had gone on in every BTAS video about how the first episode is the trendsetter. What better trendsetter could there be for STAS Season 3 than this? But of course, I do production orders, so this season's no exception. I want to say more about Apokolips Now, but I really can't. This season's off to a great start, and we're gonna get more of that in episodes 4 and 5, Little Girl Lost. This episode's already off to a great start since Superman's now using his spaceship to travel to where Krypton used to be before exploding to trace any signs of life. He's keeping a captain's log, which I find oddly endearing.
I finally retraced the ship's escape route from my home planet, Krypton.
The music here is also very cinematic, carrying on from the last episode. Superman actually does find a distress signal and finds Krypton's sister planet, Argo. This part is really eerie. Superman travels through the halls of the Argo Citadel and it's overrun and covered in ice, until he finds the distress signal's source. It's a video from one of the last surviving women who showed how Argo used to be a beautiful planet with nature everywhere you went. But from their perspective, when Krypton suddenly exploded, the resulting shockwave tore through their planet, leaving the wasteland that Superman's now found. This family put themselves in cryopreservation in case someone arrived to help, but Superman just finds the dead bodies of the family, and my god, they did not go out peacefully, which is just tragic. Until one of the chambers lights up as Superman finds the teenage daughter. The scene cuts to the Kents in the middle of the spring as we see that Superman brought the girl back to Earth with him, as the yellow sun gives her the same abilities that Clark has. This is just a small detail, but I noticed when skimming through this scene that we never actually hear her voice until she's done flying in the sky and talks to Clark. It's the little things like that which build intrigue.
Hey!
That's enough of that, Kara.
Hey, Clark. It was such a nice day, I thought I'd just, vroom.
What did we talk about? No vroom during the daytime.
The Clarks talk about how Intergang is still at it with weapons worse than ever before. Mannheim is dead, as we all know, so Darkseid and his people are running the gang full time. Speaking of which, Lois and Jimmy are running a story on some tech show with Lois providing some expected sarcastic commentary.
Oh. Or soap, for that matter.
Until some Intergang members crash through the wall with their weapons and start stealing stuff. What I find interesting about this scene is that the two gang members are noticeably younger than we've seen before, and now they're wearing uniforms. This is something I legitimately only noticed just now. Under Mannheim, Intergang was what I said in the Season 1 review, your everyday BTAS gang, nothing to see there. But Darkseid has turned this group into a more militaristic bunch. However, I'm unsure why they're hiring so young, but that's to be revealed. Superman gets beaten pretty badly during this fight, but the gang members are forced to make an escape regardless. Jimmy finds an arcade token as we cut to the new Intergang hideout, an old rundown arcade as the picture becomes crystal clear. But before we talk about that, we must introduce the new character.
Now, what's all this fluttering, my ducklings? Your loving granny doesn't like her babies to quarrel.
This is Granny Goodness. She was seen during the Mother Box exposition dump from Apokolips Now with her trading sons with Highfather's wife. There's not much depth to it, but she looks human enough to have these teenagers under her wing, but alien enough to be threatening, with her manly voice contributing to that. Anyway, what's really happening with the new Apokoliptian Intergang is that Darkseid has gotten Granny Goodness to find rebellious teenage troublemakers and prop them up with this arcade and make them feel like they're a singular family unit. If you've ever seen the first Ninja Turtles movie, the Foot Clan is basically the same thing as this. When really, these kids are just being turned into an unpaid militia used to commit crimes, which is a terrible thing to happen. Another thing to add to Darkseid's tally. On a more optimistic note, the next scene really entertains me as the secretary alerts Clark of his visitor.
Mr. Kent,
Yes?
your cousin to see you.
Cousin?
It's me, Kara.
I know.
You saw through my secret identity? Ah!
At the same time, Lois doesn't believe Jimmy has what it takes to find more on the Intergang story, and so he decides to investigate the arcade token himself. Since Clark won't let Kara help him either, they decide to team up and find Intergang's hideout as Granny talks about how she takes the poor victims of society and gives them the power to fight back against their non-existent oppressors. Make of that what you will. I just thought it was an interesting reaffirmation of what I was discussing earlier. Kara has had enough of this and turns into Supergirl, her official debut scene. How Jimmy met Kara when she got yelled at by Clark at the planet, sees she's Supergirl, and yet has no idea that Clark is Superman is beyond me. But that's not important. Granny brings the 3 female Furies from Apokolips to fight against Supergirl, which is admittedly a pretty weak action scene, since for some reason that I can't describe, Supergirl's animation just looks really stiff and awkward when in combat. In a seemingly unrelated scene, Clark and Lois are reporting on how a meteor is going to pass by Earth very soon, which won't cause any damage, but will be close to the planet's orbit nonetheless. Until they see these Apokoliptians tearing up the streets, prompting Superman to dive in, pissed off at the sight of them. But by the end of the scene, Superman gets captured and is taken to Apokolips for the very first time, as Supergirl travels there to save him. Let it be known that I really like the DCAU Supergirl. In a similar vein to Robin and TNBA, you root for her to be successful, especially as she gets to grip with her abilities.
Yes!
Now, how her character is portrayed could be a topic for other episodes, but I just want to get that out there. Every time they do an outdoor shot in Apokolips, I can't help but notice the fact that we always see slaves walking by the screen, and ugh, Apokolips really is a good name for this place. In Blast from the Past, I made a point about how Superman shows no respect for the villains, even when pinned down, but this actually is a character trait of his, as he's being brought in chains to the throne of Darkseid.
Ever proud, a Kryptonian? I must say, I find it wearying.
What was this bootlicker doing on Earth, Darkseid?
One thing I love about Darkseid is that this is his 4th out of 8 appearances in the DCAU, and there is always variety with him. In the last video, I made a note about how a lot of STAS villains just do the same stuff over and over again, but Darkseid really stands out since he's the antithesis of that. And in his 3 STAS Season 3 episodes, he tries to take over / destroy Earth, and he does it in a new way every time. In the previous episode, he just came to Earth, almost completely took over, and killed Turpin on his way out. But now that the treaty with New Genesis is in place, he found a new strategy. Remember that meteor I was talking about earlier? Well, you see, what Darkseid has had Granny and Intergang do while stealing technology is build a device that will pull that comet into Earth's orbit and destroy the planet, meaning that he doesn't even have to be on Earth to destroy it.
However, if the Earth were to be destroyed by a natural disaster, say, a stray comet, well then, I could not be held accountable.
Can you just picture it?
I can. I've seen one planet die, and I'm not gonna stand by and watch it happen again.
Noble sentiments, my dear.
Superman has already seen the destruction these Omega beams can cause, and he as well is not going to watch it happen again.
Darkseid!
That is so far the most physical altercation that Superman has had with Darkseid yet, but it was one push before Granny went to his defense. Having already finished the season, I think it's great we've never seen Superman and Darkseid in a fair battle one-on-one before. We're gonna have to wait for the series finale to get that epic encounter. In another awkward fight scene, the Furies are defeated and the Supers just barely escape Apokolips as they both do their best to stop the comet, proving that Supergirl totally has what it takes to be a hero even if she makes mistakes along the way. Meanwhile on Apokolips, even Granny's not immune from punishment for failing.
Furies, teach Granny the price of failure.
No, my precious girls! Don't! Don't hurt your beloved Granny!
Thus ending Little Girl Lost. A great episode. Now, this episode's not nearly as good as Apokolips Now, but I love how this episode, in typical STAS fashion, starts off as a continuation from the Krypton lore, The Last on Krypton and Stolen Memories, and then merges it with the Apokolips plot from the previous seasons and Apokolips Now, making for a great story as Supergirl proves herself to Superman and the world at large, and like I said, she's really a good character. Although unlike Batman's sidekick, she doesn't appear much in STAS, only 2 appearances across the remaining 12 episodes. But her debut episode was definitely a good one. Now that's technically 4 straight episodes of the status quo changing event revolving around Darkseid. I think it's a good time to take a break from all that since we won't see Darkseid again till the series finale, with nothing but standalone episodes coming along the way. But don't discount them for not really being a part of the main arc, because within these next 13 episodes there is a ton of A-tier content, and some more mixed results. But let's dive right in with episode 6, Where There's Smoke. So this episode opens on a fancy cruise museum as this guy out front won't let anyone else in, not even taking bribes, until this peculiar woman arrives and kisses them to be let in. Clark and Jimmy are here reporting on it as the woman walks in.
Now there's a camera-friendly face.
Not exactly newsworthy, Jim.
This is for my private collection.
This woman, named Volcana, has fire-based abilities and lights the whole place aflame, as Clark turns into Superman to save the day. I didn't really mention this before, but it just sort of stuck out to me how the animators portray fire lighting. It was a bit inconsistent in the BTAS era, since there was this shot in Beware the Grey Ghost where everything looked a bit orange, which makes a bit more sense to how the World's Finest and Beyond era portrays it, and you probably thought I was never going to bring that up again. Anyway, other instances of fire just make things brighter, like this shot in It's Never Too Late, or Phantasm, or Sub-Zero, and so on. But in World's Finest and Beyond era, examples like Torch Song from TNBA or this episode where everything just looks white. I don't know, it's just kind of distracting to me. So now it's clear that Volcana lit the place on fire so that everyone will clear out so she can steal some models. Clark later visits the club to see what happened for himself, and how many times must I say that Clark is a great investigative journalist? Well, this is the last video I'm going to be able to do it in, so let's see it.
I'm a reporter. I was just
Sorry. My crew's cleaning hazardous chemicals from the interior. You'll have to move back.
Hazardous chemicals? At a yacht club?
Fuel storage, petroleum, you know.
The Metropolis Yacht Club is sail power only. There's no fuel being stored there. I want to see what's going on.
For your own safety, I suggest you back off.
There's another really interesting scene right after that as this undercover agent disguised as a hobo starts following Clark as he leads him into a dead end. But then, as Superman, he watches the agent slip inside a mysterious underground building underneath the Metropolis Federal Building. Something's afoot here. We then cut to Volcana as she's arranging to sell off the stolen goods from the beginning of the episode. As the client then hangs up the phone, this happens.
When?
Tuesday. Meet me at the usual place. You won't be sorry.
Where exactly is the usual place?
A lot has happened so far in this episode, but they have built up a lot of intrigue. I mean, we don't know who Volcana is, obviously, but she seems to be more than a typical villain since she wants to escape from the city, but for some reason, a government agent was following Clark just because he was curious about the site of the stolen goods, which makes you wonder, what's the connection? Is this guy with the eye patch working underhandedly with the federal building? Are they in on what's ever happening right underneath the floor? All things will be revealed as we go. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Clark visits a center for youths, which seems normal, but then it's revealed that this is a center for paranormal youths, to teach kids with extraordinary abilities to control their powers, like water manipulation, telekinesis, and so on. The lead guy seems normal enough, but Clark asks the simple question of where the funding is coming from for a big NGO like this.
Who pays for all this?
I thought you were doing a story about paranormals.
Just trying to be thorough. Where does your funding come from?
Why, we have donors and...
The government?
Mr. Kent, we do some very worthwhile work here.
This just seems so weird. I don't know how to put it quite yet, but it seems strange for the government to have a vested interest in training these metahumans, especially when Clark asks this question.
Ever have anyone who exhibited pyrokinetic abilities?
Pyrokinesis?
You know, the ability to start and control fires.
Oh dear. Look at the time.
Obviously, he's hiding something, but let's look at the scene in his office.
Now that went well.
I'm doing the best I can.
That's what we're afraid of.
The director himself seems to have powers too, which he uses to escape as Clark brings him back to his apartment. Now the picture will be made crystal clear. Volcana was a teenage girl with powers beyond her control. The government came, took her, changed her name to Volcana, and tried to turn her into a living weapon. This is why they give funding to that care center for paranormal kids. They need to find, pick, and choose who will be the most powerful for or against them. Volcana escaped and now needs to get out of Metropolis since these agents are trying to get her back at all costs. Superman tries to save her before it's too late, but she escapes back to her apartment only to meet the agent with the eye patch.
You shouldn't have left us.
I don't like being used.
All for a good cause.
I'll be the judge of that. And if you're thinking you can make me go back, forget it.
Now that's where you're wrong.
Back at the federal building, they're about to trash the evidence of Volcana ever having existed in the first place until we get what has got to be one of the most intense Superman scenes yet.
It's a G40 blue laser, alien. One shot can penetrate 5 feet of tempered steel in 0.3 seconds. I don't think even...
I repeat, where did they take her?
Yikes. Superman means business here. Much like how Batman sees it, children is one step too far. It doesn't matter if you're Joker or if you're working for the federal building. Another interesting point is that the guy who pointed that gun at Superman referred to him as Alien. The only other time I can think of is General Hardcastle from the Promethean in Season 1. It seems like the government just does not like Superman. I mean, why else would they want to turn metahuman kids into weapons on their side? Well, this is just the beginning, folks. Through a bit of dialogue, we found out that before escaping, Volcana had been a hired gun for these guys, but they no longer trust her and she's probably gonna die until Superman saves the day. Volcana tries to get revenge on the guy with the eye patch, but Superman suggests that she lets the courts handle this. However, from her perspective, these people had just used their legal status to do this to her in the first place. So the only justice she can count on is her own definition. But she ends up blowing the whole facility to smithereens by accident with some explosive barrels nearby.
Could be worse.
Could be Metropolis Women's Prison, if you weren't so volatile.
Polite to the end. Your mother raised you well.
I was lucky.
Yes, you were. I hope you'll think of me, especially on those cold Metropolis nights.
Don't you ever cool down?
Not a very big fan of the way that last scene was written, since I think it stresses the wrong thing. I mean, Volcana flirting makes sense, but Superman doing it too is a little weak. What I think is the important takeaway from that scene is that Superman really was lucky. I mean, the Kents took him as their own baby in The Last Son of Krypton, but any other couple might have just turned in this baby that crash landed on Earth into the government, and who knows what would have happened to him after that. Since it's important to note that DCAU Superman did not become a hero because he had powers, he came to terms with his abilities and decided to use them for good because of the way he was raised by the Kents. But regardless, that ends where there's smoke. I had a lot more to say about this episode than I thought I did going into it. This is one of those episodes that stands out to me with how well written it is when you stop and think about it. I thought it was a good episode when I watched it, but now I can for sure tell you that this was great. An episode where Clark has a fascinating display of human compassion, a dark story about government and metahumans with great animation and lighting. This might seem like a standalone episode, but again, this episode is part of a bigger picture that will soon become clear. But that covers this episode. Let's move on to another one of my favorites from this season. Episode 7, Nighttime. I think it's fair to say this episode is one of the most famous from STAS. And from a standalone episode's perspective, I've always had a blast watching it, so let's get into it. Roxy Rocket from TNBA's The Ultimate Thrill is seen blasting through the highways of Metropolis with Superman in pursuit. She reveals that Batman's missing and crime has gone way up in Gotham, so she'd try her luck here. Superman was unaware of this and decides to pay Gotham a visit as we cut to a department store getting robbed.
The cops are swamped and the Bat's a no-show. Who's gonna come?
There's always the relief pitcher.
Smoke 'em!
Ah, I see where this is going. Tim Drake as Robin was such a great character in TNBA, so I'm happy to see him back with all the same energy he brought to the screen before still being left intact.
Let's just get out of here.
It's cold out. Better bundle up.
Superman arrives to help and asks Robin where Bruce is. According to Robin, Bruce said he was going away on a work trip and sounded weird while doing so. Batgirl and Nightwing thought it could have been Ra's al Ghul that captured Bruce and went overseas to investigate, leaving Robin here to defend the city in the midst of the crisis. Every time that bat signal goes on, it just gets worse and worse. So Superman has an idea.
It gets worse every time he doesn't show.
Then this time, he will.
Good evening, Commissioner. Sorry I'm late.
Oh my goodness. This is one of my favorite Superman scenes in the DCAU. Superman is dressed in a Batman costume, pretending to be him, and when the commercial break ends, Gordon preps Batman and what's happened, and the way Superman puts his hands on his hips and looks determined into the sky, dramatically wrapping his cape around himself, nodding his head to everything Gordon says is just so funny to me. I guess I can start by how the animators are telling by showing. This is how Superman views Batman's mannerisms, and he looks like a complete doofus, with Robin having to slip Superman answers to Gordon's questions.
Ah, yes. Bane.
So, how did Superman do Batman's voice like that? Well, straight out of some 40s comic book, DCAU Superman evidently has the ability to mimic people's voices to a T with, quote, precise muscle control.
Plus, I have a pretty good ear. Don't do that again.
They access Bruce's files to show that he told his offices that he was on a personal vacation, which contradicts his statement to his house that he was leaving on work.
See what I mean about him acting strange? He's smiling.
Using his supervision, Superman can clearly see strange nanites on Bruce's papers, with them all over the phone. The first thought is that the Mad Hatter must be behind this plot, so they track down Penguin to reveal the location. And with this being BTAS Penguin, he's gonna get humiliated somehow, right? The Mad Hatter is currently teamed up with the Riddler and Bane to take over the city. I remember back in TNBA, the only design I didn't like was the Riddler, but luckily for us, he had no significant screen time. Here we get to see Riddler in his full ridiculous getup. I don't think designs change how a scene is written, but still, he just looks stupid. But at least the Mad Hatter's on point.
Tweedlebane and Tweedlebrain. If it's all the same, I'll play your game.
Bane is of course ready to test out his new Venom formula, and when it seems like Bane is the upper hand, you remember the fact that this is Superman we're talking about? And now, prepare yourself for what might be my single most nitpicky point ever. I have been accused of many, but this one, I agree. But I just have to say it. I really like how when Bane punches Superman dressed as Batman, he grunts in his normal Superman voice and not in his fake Batman voice, since he's trying to do that voice, whereas grunts of pain are an instinct and therefore would not be in his Batman impression. There. I said it. I think that's probably the stupidest thing I've ever spent a sentence writing about, so let's quickly move on. I'm really surprised after the complete devastation Superman just unleashed on Bane that he would come back later in Mystery of the Batwoman thinking he was gonna win. I mean, nobody knew that wasn't Batman. Speaking of which, I just love how Superman completely trolls these Batman villains. It's so funny.
Curiouser and curiouser.
The Mad Hatter gives the nanites a look, and it turns out that he had nothing to do with it. Rather, they came of an alien origin.
He's really being controlled by aliens? Ugh.
I'm deeply hurt.
Sorry.
While going over the tapes, Superman can clearly hear the sound of a rocket being fired in the background, and so that must mean Bruce's true location is at Wayne Aerospace, where we see him strangely clear the building when the work is done, revealing that Brainiac was behind this whole thing with a reconstructed body. But how in the world did Brainiac get to Bruce? Well, remember back to Stolen Memories. At the end of the episode, Brainiac had hacked into Luthor's servers. He did not succeed in destroying the planet, but he left enough of himself behind to build a partial reconstruction of his body, which needed Luthor to be properly finished. That was back in Ghost in the Machine. Around that time was World's Finest, where we learned that Bruce and Lex had been in a corporate partnership for a few months by that point. So needless to say, knowledge of Bruce was in Lex's systems, and that was how Brainiac caught wind of him and his resources, and that's the explanation the episode goes with, and I like it. Brainiac tries to dispose of Batman, revealing Superman underneath.
Kal-El, this development was highly improbable.
Today's been full of surprises.
Superman just barely destroys the ship before Brainiac manages to escape the planet. By the way, does DCAU Superman have the ability to breathe in space? I mean, he has a spacesuit, but both this episode and Little Girl Lost have shown him in space. Maybe there's a range, who knows. But regardless, Bruce is back to normal, his systems have been reset, and he and Superman have gained that ever so slight increase in respect for one another.
I have to say, for a guy who's supposed to be such a loner, you sure know how to pick a partner.
Can I point out how great this season has been so far? That's another stellar episode to add to the list. Great cast of characters, creative and memorable story, you name it, Nighttime's got it. The first 7 episodes of this season have been quite the treat, with each standing on its own as an interesting and engaging plot. Let's hope the season stays with it as we continue in episode 8, New Kids in Town. From the very start of this episode, we're thrust into a new setting, the year 2979. As Brainiac is busting into a vault of some kind looking for a teleporter, Given the screwy air dates, I won't take too many points off for doing Brainiac right after the last episode, but still, production-wise, it is back-to-back. Brainiac is going to travel through time to find young Clark Kent before he becomes Superman and wrecks his attempt to destroy, and then escape from Earth. Brainiac continuing to come back doesn't really bother me that much, seeing as up to this point it's always been well explained, and in 2 videos from now we're going to get the baseline explanation. This episode, despite what you might expect, is another DC Comics setup story. So far we've had 5, and this is the 6th, with 2 more coming before this video is up. This episode introduces the Legion of Superheroes, a campy 40s-esque team with campy powers. The 3 team members will be following are Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Chameleon Boy. Evidently, Superman was such an influential superhero in the DCAU that Brainiac trying to kill him would be bad in and of itself, but unravel history too. So stopping him is of the utmost importance. But once they get there, there's a completely filler scene where this farmer gets mad since he thinks they're the kids pulling pranks in his yard. I guess this gives us a chance to see the Legion's powers in action before fighting Brainiac, but still, it's kinda lame. But what is interesting is Clark Kent himself, since the episode cuts to a scene at the Smallville High dance. I wasn't sure when this episode took place, but it's clear while watching it that this is before The Last Son of Krypton Part 2, where Clark learned that he was Kryptonian and came to terms with his gifts, since he clearly has not taken a bite of humble pie in this episode. But to make it worse, Brainiac strikes as cold and unemotional as ever. I'm just gonna skip a few scenes ahead, since for right now Clark is just taught about the world of the 30th century, so let's get to the good stuff. The kid that Clark embarrassed at the dance is having a bad enough day until Brainiac demands answers from him.
Where does Clark Kent live?
Clark, what is this?
Insufficient response.
The timing there always gets a chuckle out of me. As Brainiac attacks the Kent home, I'm reminded of just how good the Kents are as characters. They are one note as they come, but every time they're on screen, you can just tell they're good people and really do care about their alien son. And as I've said, that heroic attitude carries over to Clark.
You want me, Brainiac? Here I am!
From there, the Legion of Superheroes help finish off Brainiac and transport him far away from here. And yeah, I'm basically skimming over the details, but anyway, they wipe everyone's memory of these events as Clark is digging the glasses look.
Where'd you get those?
I'm not sure. What do you think? Are they me?
You are so weird.
New Kids in Town's not a special episode by any means, but I really enjoyed it for what it was. I mean, it's a charming story, good animation, and so on. It doesn't really warrant a big discussion, so I won't give it that. But let's get these next 2 over with fast, since I think they're the least interesting in this season, starting with episode 9, Obsession. We open at a fashion show, and those never end well in the DCAU. Lana Lang is showing off a new line, I have no idea how the fashion industry works, of swimwear, as it's confirmed that Jimmy Olsen is totally saving these photos to his hard drive.
I can't believe we're getting paid to do this.
Covering some fashion show? That's why I became a reporter, Jimmy.
We just saw the younger Clark and Lana in the previous episode, so it's a nice contrast to see them both back again in the present day. The star model is Darcy Mason, who is immediately kidnapped by a bunch of toy men, which all but confirms that this plot is by the toy man himself.
Darcy, so beautiful. Soon you'll be all mine.
Ugh. Clark thinks Darcy is suspicious and finds that she's not at her apartment, and when he sneaks in, he realizes that there's nothing in the apartment. When thinking about the structure of this episode, I don't think the mystery is anything too special. I was actually pretty intrigued when there was no food in the fridge, for example, but at the same time we know it was Toyman who sent these toy men after her. I mean, his name's written all over it. And then the episode confirms it, but we don't know why he would want Darcy, but he was seen playing with a doll similar to her. Regardless, it was pretty funny when she walked into the apartment as Clark is just there looking around, but to cut to the chase, Superman has a fight with a toy kangaroo as he throws it out the window.
Hey, lady, you can't park there. It's for emergencies only.
Your definition of emergency is way too limited.
It turns out that Darcy is a life-sized model of the doll that used to be popular, but she escaped from the toy man and tried to exist on her own, and now she wants to stop him for good. But she's also going to kill Lana, who manages to hold her own long enough for Superman to arrive to put out the fire Darcy started with a new plot-convenient method he found. Let's see, Darcy gets captured, Superman fights a VR robot, and this fight scene is short, but it drags on and on as he fights a toy. Needless to say, there's just not much drama here. In the end, Darcy decides to crash the helicopter she and Toyman are in to stop him, but she's still alive in the end. When an episode review is mostly summary, the episode is pretty dry. I mean, it's fine, but certainly not worth much discussion, which is definitely a lower bar of quality than what we've seen so far in Season 3. Episode 10, Little Big Head Man. This one starts on Bizarro's planet as we see his status quo since he was dropped here towards the end of the last season. Honestly, I don't find Bizarro to be very entertaining or funny on his own. I just feel bad for him. I mean, a great way for him to go out would have been his debut episode where he died a hero, just like Superman, but the more he sticks around, the more sad it gets. And my favorite fourth dimensional imp agrees with me.
This is so sad! I can't take it anymore! If I stayed quiet one more second, I'd need a colossal barf bag!
Mix knows that he's banned from attacking Superman again, but nobody said he couldn't just get Bizarro worked up and have him do it, which is exactly what he does. They don't interact too much, but for what it's worth, Mix and Bizarro play off each other pretty well. So Bizarro attacking Lois and Superman because they laughed at him is a pretty bad motivation, but this is Bizarro, which of course plays into why I don't find him funny as a standalone antagonist since he's pretty much mentally handicapped. Spitlick has some good commentary over the whole thing, but that doesn't change the fact that this is an episode I'd probably skip if I did an STAS rewatch. But in the end, the fourth dimension elders decide that with these childish pranks, Mix is unworthy of his powers, and so they sentence him to 3 months of community service on Bizarro's planet once Superman sorts it out with him and saves the day. And I love how this episode ends.
Nice doggy! Heal! Play dead! Help!
Life am good.
So that was that. The least interesting episode in this season by far. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm selling episodes like this short. I mean, just to make it clear, I thought it was a fine episode with some funny moments, but it fades into the white noise after a bit. So let's get back to talking about the not always good, but interesting stuff nonetheless with episode 11, Absolute Power. This episode opens with Superman exploring the galaxy yet again as he explains what a black hole is in his captain's log voice. But he finds a distress signal nearby about to be sucked into the black hole as Superman risks his own life to save the ship before it falls in. There's a part where he fails at first since Superman isn't all powerful in the DCAU as we know, which when thinking about it is a pretty perilous set piece. I mean, do I need to tell you the danger of going that close to a black hole? Similar to Little Girl Lost, I also love the sweeping galactic score. Superman brings the ship back to the planet, but for some reason everyone on the vessel really hates him and thinks he's one of them. This builds intrigue since who else knows of anybody like Superman out there since he's the last Kryptonian after all. Even the local military trying to shoot down the people we just saved thinks Superman is one of them. So what's going on here?
Hold your fire! Stand down at once! Kal-El, welcome to New Krypton.
Jack-Sur and Mala are back. These two were part of the two-part episode Blasts from the Past, which despite me trying hard to think otherwise, it wasn't a very good episode. At the end, they were sent to the Phantom Zone, and in this story, it's revealed that scientists from this alien planet had been studying 2 asteroids that were about to collide in front of a black hole, and when they did, a hole opened in the Phantom Zone, and they escaped and were rescued by the researchers. Superman rightly points out that in exchange for being rescued, they then took over the whole planet. Jack-Sur instead explains that what had happened was that he turned what was once a faction military war zone into a planet that was far more productive, where people worked together in industry to actually make things happen. I thought this was a pretty interesting angle, since I thought what Jack-Sur said was pretty convincing, and at this point in the episode I wasn't sure where the writers were taking it, so I was interested. Maybe it's just Ron Perlman's voice, I don't know. Speaking of voices, Mala now has an actress that's nothing like the old one, but it's Mala. Do I really care? Let's look back at the Blast from the Past for a sec. Superman found out about the regime led by Jack-Sur and Mala to take over the Kryptonian government, and since the council seemed like a bunch of hacks in the last son of Krypton, maybe a Jack-Sur rule wouldn't have been so bad. Jack-Sur is almost assassinated, and after everything he's seen, Superman reluctantly decides to leave. Until one of the renegades arrived to tell him that the ship he rescued earlier was not criminals on their escape, like Jack-Sur said. Instead, they were former leaders trying to find another world to live on. She also shows Superman what Jack-Sur has been building, and that is an entire armada set up to take over and destroy Earth as Superman is captured and set to be executed by way of a black hole. Of course, there's an escape, but what's most interesting is the lighting when Superman faces Jack-Sur and Mala. He's black and white, which doesn't seem too bad, but then when the door closes from the thing causing that lighting, he's still black and white. I mean, did Akon come back for a few frames? Superman gets on one of the last escape pods, and Jack-Sur and Mala literally die in the black hole. Need I remind you of what I said at the beginning of this episode about how high those stakes are? With their deaths, that confirms yes, Superman is the last Kryptonian standing. But anyway, let's see the ending.
Although Satea's people were grateful for my help, I wondered if it wasn't I who should be grateful. They reminded me of the saying, evil triumphs when good men do nothing.
That was absolute power. It has nothing on the first 7 episodes, but I think it's around the quality of New Kids in Town, which I thought was really good. I think this episode makes Jax-O and Mala far more interesting than they were before, a lot of intriguing plot points, and is overall much better than Obsession and Little Big Head Man, which were both fine, but nothing amazing. This episode doesn't really stand out in an uber fascinating way, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So, now it's time for the DCAU to expand yet again in episode 12, In Brightest Day. So, this episode was written by Hilary J. Batter, who I have yet to mention as retrospective up to this point. I decided to finally mention her by name since I think she was extremely talented. She contributed to a large amount of episodes in the World's Finest and Beyond era, having written great TNBA episodes like Cold Comfort, Mean Seasons, You Scratch My Back, or Animal Act, as well as some great STAS episodes like A Little Piece of Home, My Girl, Where There's Smoke, this episode, and a later episode this season. Not everything she did was great, having written some of the boring episodes last season and Girls Night Out, but I wanted to highlight someone who often goes unmentioned when discussing the great DCAU talent. If you're well versed in DC Comics, the title should be no stranger to you. The famous saying of the Green Lantern Corps, in brightest day, blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight, and so on. Meaning, yeah, we're gonna learn about the Green Lantern Corps in this episode. But first, we start with Jimmy and his friend Kyle Rayner, who is the artist at the Daily Planet, discussing the fact that his artwork is never getting any credit since he can't get work in the comic book world. But at the same time, he also has tremendous physical ability when Jimmy gets his camera stolen.
Quarterback at Metro High. He didn't stand a chance.
Meanwhile, a group of astronauts are landing, but are shot off by what looks to be like a stray comet. Superman saves them, but the stray comet was actually a ship that crash landed in the woods with the Green Lantern, Abin Sur, about to pass away inside. He requests that the ring on his finger go find someone else of equal strength, and on its way, this happens in the Hall of the Daily Planet. Oh, and this too.
Lois? Have you seen Kyle Rayner?
Yeah, Chief. He was heading to the one place in this world even my credentials won't get me in.
Now that Kyle has the Green Lantern's ring, I want to say, this is how you do an introduction to new lore. I'm of course talking about how much of a fail the Hand of Fate last season was, which was especially weird given the fact that literally every other DC Comics intro was great, from Jonah Hex to Zatanna to Flash or Etrigan. This season already showed the Legion of Superheroes. This episode's about the Green Lanterns, and Aquaman will appear in 2 episodes from now. The Green Lantern isn't something you can just casually introduce. I mean, this episode just outright explains it in vivid detail since it's so weird after all. I can explain that in a second, because first and foremost, Superman gets attacked by Sinestro, a yellow lantern, with this scene showing what kind of powers these rings are capable of. The answer is basically anything. Superman uses all his usual methods like throwing a tree or just charging at him, but the ring can be a buzzsaw, it can make a cage, be a giant mallet, or whatever else the holder wants. Sinestro is looking for the actual lantern that powered Abin Sur's ring, but it's not there, so he searches elsewhere. The lantern itself shows Superman the Green Lantern Council on the planet Oa, where they explain that they're an intergalactic law enforcement group as the rings pick someone from that sector of the galaxy with intelligence that demonstrates the characteristics needed for the job. Willpower, courage, imagination, and stuff like that. Sinestro's now an ex-Green Lantern with his powers surpassing that of a regular Lantern, so Kyle's gonna need Superman's help taking him down. Imagination's a core part of this power since the ring can make anything, like I said, and you just need to think of it, which Kyle does when a truck explodes near him and he makes a crowbar to break through the jammed door and a wrench to open the fire hydrant. In the climax, Superman and Green Lantern work together to stop Sinestro, which is about all there is to it. I mean, the fight seems pretty good, but in the end, Kyle is officially made the new Green Lantern in place of Abin Sur, ending the episode. I realize that technically speaking, nothing really worth going in depth happened in this episode, but for the sake of the retrospective, I had to explain what happened in this episode since I'm sure that's basically what the writers were thinking. It's not about the actual plot. What's most important in this episode is that we know what the Green Lantern Corps is, and we know how they choose candidates, how much power a Green Lantern has, and that there are many Green Lanterns in the universe. Since Kyle Rayner isn't going to be the Green Lantern in Justice League, but we do know that there are many Green Lanterns, so it doesn't make a big difference. We also don't need someone to explain what any of this is in the event they made a Justice League show, which they did. So all that groundwork has been established here. The same goes for me. It saves me time in the Justice League Season 1 script to explain how it all works. Having said that, In Brightest Day is still a really good and interesting episode on its own, since I really like Kyle Rayner. The Daily Planet cast will have their cameos and they're good as usual. I really like the heroic scene where Superman saves the astronauts, you name it. No flaws to speak of. But on the subject of flaws, let's talk about what is, 7 times out of 10, considered the worst episode of the DCAU ever made. I've said something like this pertaining to Bruce Timm's personal least favorite episodes before, but I mean all across the board, this is a pretty despised episode. I'm of course talking about episode 13, Superman's Pal. The title alone smells like I've got Batman in my basement, but I'll just put it out there. I don't think this episode is as boring and at worst obnoxious as that. Right off the bat, the animation in this looks a lot worse than it usually does. Just generally speaking, I think this is the worst animated STAS episode of all time. Everything just looks flatter and uglier than in Brightest Day and the next episode, A Fish Story. You know something's wrong immediately when Lois is a new intern working for her, a girl who wears far too much gold named Tina. I mean, would they really introduce a new character in the 13th out of 18th episode of the final season? I doubt it. Jimmy has tried to ask her out, but to no avail. But then there's a high-speed chase right outside as Superman goes to save the day, and to make it worse... Wait, what was that? The helicopter pilot has no idea there was another chopper right next to them? Makes no sense to me. Jimmy saves one of the chopper pilots and Superman acts like an ass for no reason.
Got time for a statement, Superman?
You wouldn't want it. Thanks for your help, Jimmy.
So, Angela Chen. This woman has been a recurring character in most episodes of the show, dating back to The Last Son of Krypton, and has competed with Lois numerous times since then, but does she work for the planet? I mean, she's shown on the Metropolis edition for Channel 3 in numerous episodes, but there was also this shot in Mixius Pixelated where she was working at the planet, so is this a mistake or what? Anyway, she asked Jimmy if he is friends with Superman, and this part is just so dumb that I had to laugh at it. Jimmy basically said no during the interview, but Angela changed it to this in the edited version.
So how would you characterize your friendship with Superman?
Real comfortable. I'd call us pals.
There you have it.
They make some good references to continuity, like how Jimmy helped Superman from Parasite in Feeding Time, or how he got saved from Luminous in Solar Power, and earlier in this season when Jimmy helped Supergirl find Inner Gang in Little Girl Lost. And Lois has quite the reaction to this.
What? Hold it right there! First of all, Superman saved us from Luminous, not the other way around. And second, what am I, chopped liver?
I'm sure Superman likes you too.
Did you see the way Clark was animated there? It just looks so bad. Again, very uncharacteristic for a late STAS episode. Now, Tina wants to go out with Jimmy, and we get this utterly insane scene where everyone in the known universe wants to hang out with and give free stuff to Jimmy. Criminals also want to beat his ass, and then everyone wants to advertise to him.
Come to think of it, I never got to thank the big lug. Tell you what, if I wrote him a thank you note, you think you could...
Pass an invitation on to him? My kid's birthday's coming up, and he just loves Superman. Superman this, Superman that. If I wasn't such a secure father, I'd be jealous. Anyway, the little guy'd really appreciate it.
If Big Blue would do an endorsement on one of our TV spots. We're Big Blue Automotive, it's a natural. And don't you worry, you get a finder's fee. I take care of my friends. Frankly, my boy, you have no idea how much it would mean.
To all the little baby seals if Superman would come to our charity dinner.
This is the kind of funny that just makes you want to cover your eyes. It's just so bad that I can't stop looking. The plot finally goes somewhere when Tina saves Jimmy from a group of girls that want to go out with him to meet Superman. But then it turns out that Tina was working for Metallo all along. Dun dun dun. Yeah, nobody cares. I'm sure Metallo's just gonna flash kryptonite at Superman and then die, and then find a way to come back in a later episode. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. Only for some reason now, Metallo's kryptonite fires a solid dark green laser at Superman. Looks pretty awful. Jimmy tries to escape, but fails to realize that you need keys to drive a car. Superman rushes to Jimmy's aid, and it was this scene where I realized...
I gotta start wearing pants.
Yup, this episode sucks. After a horrific action scene, Superman actually does something really nice for Jimmy, ending the episode on a good note.
Here, I made you a thank you gift.
You didn't have to. I mean, you've saved my life too. Only like 1,000,000 times.
It's not just a watch. This button emits a hypersonic signal. If I'm anywhere in the city, I'll hear it and I'll come. I figured you might need it, now that everyone knows we're friends. Just don't wear it out.
I think it's clear how bad this episode is. I mean, bad jokes, just terrible animation, but the thing is, the premise alone is so absurd that I actually loved every second of it, except when Metallo was on screen. I haven't enjoyed anything about him since The Way of All Flesh, but I mean, the Everyone Loves Jimmy scene was hilarious, and so was the edited interview, to the point where I can safely say that watching this episode again would not be a challenge for me like I've Got Batman in My Basement or Prophecy of Doom. But it is most certainly the worst made episode of Superman the Animated Series by far. But hey, I mean, I still managed to find it pretty entertaining. Let's forget about this mess and move on to episode 14, A Fish Story. So this episode opens with Lois and Jimmy covering a story on the water, as there's been rumors of a giant sea monster attacking sailor boats, which of course means all the sea animals attack the ship as Jimmy falls into the water. In a surprising display of continuity, Jimmy still has the beacon he got from Superman in the last episode, prompting him to stop the animals and fix the damaged ship. Again, I'm actually pretty surprised when BTAS or STAS show off continuity, since largely they're episodic, but when there is a reference or two, I think it's cool. Lois and Jimmy interview one of the leading marine biologists on the subject, who says that this wasn't anything out of the ordinary, which obviously is a lie of some kind, and we just need to figure out what it is. Which becomes clear when Lois spots Mercy in Lex's limo outside. I know what you're thinking. Finally, another Lex episode. I never really thought about this while watching the season, but Lex hasn't really done anything so far. There was a cutaway to his office during Darkseid's speech in Apokolips Now, but other than that he's had no screen time of any kind. He's up to something on the water which Lois wants to get to the bottom of, and so she finds the captive Aquaman in the back room. Yes, the King of Atlantis himself has tried to stop Luthor from doing whatever it is he's doing, but has been captured, and that's why the ocean animals are going crazy. Speaking of crazy, Aquaman was never a character I was particularly a fan of, but of course his DCAU incarnation is the best one I've ever seen, which can be much further expanded upon in JL, but for right now, I really like him. But before she can do anything, she and Aquaman are taken hostage by the scientists.
What else was I supposed to do? I had to take her.
Idiot! Having Lois Lane is an open invitation for Superman to stick his nose into your business. Get rid of them both, now!
But I was hoping to observe the creature in captivity.
You're the one who's going to be in captivity unless you do what I say.
And I know, I have to play the clip every time Lex threatens somebody like that, but it's just always a great scene, so what can I do? So what Lex is up to is testing explosives in the water to remain undetected by the world at large, but this, of course, upsets the Atlantean people, which is obviously a shock to Lois that it's real, but that's contrasted well by Aquaman just nonchalantly saying so. What's interesting about a lot of the concepts introduced in STAS Season 3 is that we don't get to go to New Genesis or Oa or Atlantis. We, like I said in Brightest Day, learn about them, but we save the visit for the next show. Aquaman has control of more than just fish, as he sicks birds on Luthor's guys, in addition to being more than capable in combat. Oh, and Lois also runs this guy over. No big deal. I think the ensuing chase ends in a pretty clever fashion. With Lois and Aquaman going over the cliff, to make sure the pursuers think Lois is dead, Aquaman has a shark chase her under the water without telling her the plan, which is actually pretty cruel, but it worked long enough for Superman to arrive. Which leads to one of the best scenes in the episode.
Excellent.
You've got to call off the test, now.
It's Mr. Luthor that gives the orders here.
Mind your manners.
These are international waters, and I'm perfectly within my legal rights. The test will proceed, and there is nothing you can do to stop it.
I think that's pretty interesting. I mean, Luthor's not wrong. His testing these explosives on these particular waters is within his legal right, but it of course harms an entire society under the water. But said society has never disclosed their existence, so they can't just take it to court. Luthor most certainly has every legal right to the equipment he's putting in the water, so there's no question about that, which only raises more questions about who's right here. Lois gets in a really good line.
Sounds like your assets are getting kicked.
Will you please get her out of here?
But another display of villainy, Luthor says to activate the explosive now, even though his crew is still down there.
But our own men are still down there.
And their beneficiaries will be well compensated.
Aquaman calls in the entire Atlantean fleet to combat Luthor, but Superman talks Aquaman down by saying that some humans actually work towards preserving the ocean, and not everyone's like Luthor. And just when Aquaman is convinced...
Go on, run, you lousy stinking fish!
The whole fleet starts blasting at Luthor's ship, causing it to sink into the ocean, as Luthor and Mercy just leave the whole crew to drown. What's most fascinating is how different this ending from the other team-up episodes is. Every time it ended with our heroes on good terms, willing to work together another day, but for the first time ever, this team-up episode ends with our heroes on very uncertain grounds, as Aquaman says he's gonna finish the job if the ocean's disrespected again, thus ending a fish story. Similar to In Brightest Day, I think this episode's important from a timeline point of view rather than as a Superman episode, but on those grounds, it was certainly really good with a lot of unexpected moments, and as his only main villain role in the season, Lex was really good in this. So yeah, a very good episode. How about episode 15, Unity? So spring break has arrived and Kara's gonna visit Clark again. This opening scene always brings a smile to my face.
So long, Snoozeville. Hello, Metropolis.
Just a minute, little lady. You still have your chores.
Done? And done.
Kara, you know how that upsets the chickens.
Good thing I didn't ask her to milk the cow.
Oops.
Kara's attitude is one that perks up an episode, I don't know what to say.
Hey, Kara.
Hey, Alan.
Your folks said you were going to Metropolis, so I brought you something to read on your trip.
Ugh, get this loser off the screen. Kara bumps into this weird-looking guy when getting on the bus, and there will be plenty of examples to pick from later in the episode, but damn, they did a good job making him look creepy, to say the least.
Spider powers. Ew!
That's one of many Marvel references in the DCAU, and I can't be bothered to think of them all, but the Watchtower database is a video all about that if you're curious. In addition to seeing all the sights, Supergirl has been active in the city, and evidently Volcana left the island Superman put her on and continued causing trouble? This is a really minor point, but Volcana comes back twice in JL Season 2 to cause trouble, and here she is in this season doing the same. And this is one of the weirdest blanks left behind in the DCAU. I have no idea what happened to Volcana in between the end of episode 6 and this episode, and the writers don't mention it in this episode since it's just a small scene, or even in Season 2 of JL. I can bring it up then, but for now, that's quite the plot hole. When Kara gets back home, the Kents are acting pretty strange as they take her to an even stranger gathering of people chanting Unity, as Mr. Howell, the guy from the bus, sings the praises of Unity, which is...
That's disgusting.
You said it. I mean, that smile alone gives Mr. Howell a high spot in the top 5 weirdest DCAU characters. So how this works is that Unity is an alien parasite that wraps itself around the brain. Superman takes the one piece they found in Martha Kent to put it under a microscope, and this is where my one real issue with this episode comes from. Well, not really issue, more like concern. Unity is a giant tentacle monster, and I'm just going to be honest, I don't think it was a coincidence when one of Supergirl's 3 appearances in the entire show happens to involve a tentacle monster. And in the next scene, Martha's strand of the parasite is extended to the doctors as they're all trying to get Supergirl, and, well, I'm sure you're looking at the screen. I have no evidence to support this, and as a matter of fact, I don't really want to talk about it right now, but I'll have to when I get to JLU. But keep in mind for right now, this is why I stressed during Girls Night Out from TNBA and Little Girl Lost, I think DCAU Supergirl is a likable and good character, but her application is a bit more dubious than that. Which is a shame, since DCAU Batgirl was always handled well in BTIS and TNBA. But regardless, Superman discovers that the alien spores are weak against X-rays, which as we know is one of the powers he and Supergirl have. So it's the perfect weapon. If the Preserver was already the final boss in Metroid Prime 4, get a look at the final boss in Metroid Prime 6 over here. By destroying the aliens, everyone is safe and nobody remembers a thing and the day is saved. I actually enjoyed writing about this one. Those last 2 crossover episodes might have had less cracks in the armor, but on the whole, this episode is really interesting to watch, rewatch, and write about for the obvious reasons I've been showing. But as a whole, despite my biggest concern, I think this episode's a good watch. Not much more to say overall, but what I can say is we have 3 episodes left. Starting with episode 16, The Demon Reborn. Clark and Lois are at an exhibit of tribal art and artifacts, until Lois gets in a sarcastic jab, gets caught, and pulls a classic stunt.
I didn't realize you were, I mean, I was just joking, of course. It's such a wonderful thing, this whole thing. It's so wonderful, really. Have you met Clark Kent?
Gets me every time. But if there are irreplaceable goods, that means someone's going to steal them. Some guys dressed as symbiote Spider-Man with ninja weapons are here to fill that role and are far more brutal than our usual robbers until Superman busts in to stop them. The lead woman pulls off her mask, revealing Talia al Ghul. Now this was unexpected. Remember back to my review of BTAS Season 3, where I had spoken at length about the ongoing race storyline, And when we last saw him in that season, he recovered his son, Arkady Duval, from his long as all get out prison sentence. That was just the end of it. Raish never appeared again in TNBA, and as a result, I found Showdown to be an underwhelming end to the story. However, I'm actually glad they came back in a Superman episode, but I can expand upon that in a moment. The train has some innocent people on it, prompting Talia to give Superman the ultimatum: stop her and protect the staff she wants to steal, or stop the train that was about to crash. I don't know why he couldn't just grab the staff and then stop the train. Actually, thinking about it, that was a pretty contrived reason for the villains to get away, but let's focus on more important things. If the ghouls are involved, you know who's right around the corner. It's funny, I went on about how I think the first 3 seasons of BTAS especially tend to be glorified over the rest of the DCAU, but I get excited every time Batman's on the screen. DCAU Batman is just an amazing character, what more can I say? Also, am I the only one who noticed how Batman looks really weird in this episode? Mainly the fact that his body just looks smaller than usual and the ears are pretty long. I mean, this is TNBA Batman, and here he is from this episode. By the time the Demon Reborn hit the air, TNBA had been off the air for several months, with Batman Beyond taking its place as the new Batman show. I don't know, maybe they just took the model of Terry in his Batsuit and gave it a TNBA makeover and called it a day. But what do I know? Next, Batman offers Superman some criticism when analyzing the crime scene.
Leave it to you to charge in with both arms swinging.
You'd think the guy'd be more grateful towards Superman after nighttime, but you know Batman. Back at Lois's apartment, she's knocked out and then appears strapped to a building in Metropolis as Superman saves her, which turns out to be a ploy, as it was Talia who attacked Lois to keep her out of the picture while she impersonated her. This was an attempt to use the staff to capture Superman. Up to this point, I actually think it's pretty cool that Raish hasn't made an appearance in the story. I mean, we know what he looks like, but viewers in 1999 might not have, which builds up intrigue without even trying. For longtime fans, there's also intrigue since Raish has lived on for so long with the Lazarus Pit, but I'm pretty sure he said in Demon's Quest that the effectiveness is lessening with each entry. So that's why he might need the staff, and there are also traces of a wheelchair in the abandoned hideout that Batman and Superman looked into earlier. This is confirmed when Superman meets Raish face to face, as he's a decrepit old man now, making it clear why he would go after Superman, since Batman already said no to being his heir, but Superman has so much more power to absorb with the staff anyway that they just cut straight to him.
Easy, Lois. It's me.
Bruce?
Oh no. In my review of World's Finest, I gave this romance quite a bit of heat, and thankfully it doesn't get dwelled on much here, but they do acknowledge it, which is nice, but it's also a part of the continuity I would rather forget.
Actually, there's been several times when I almost picked up the phone. Maybe you felt the same way. I gotta get better locks.
Batman finds the lead on Raish's organization, and that leads to another one of Batman's best scenes ever.
Master will be expecting us. Then he's going to be disappointed.
The corny action movie one-liners, the fact that he's breaking bones, the works. This scene is brutal for these guys, and again, he really feels like a horror movie monster at times.
I'm only going to ask once. Where's Ra's al Ghul?
Superman attempts to escape, which includes beating Ubu in 2 seconds, since he's Superman, but it's in vain as he gets blasted by the staff as they begin setting up the energy transfer, turning Ra's into a Bane-esque monster, interrupted by only one thing.
What?
Batman gets beat pretty quickly by Ra's, but Superman actually takes Batman's criticism of him from earlier in the episode to beat Ra's.
The roof won't hold up much longer. Punish me or save your daughter. Your choice.
Despite hitting her earlier, Ra's evidently cares about Talia. I mean, we'll see how long that lasts. But in the end, both her and Ra's plummet into the water below as the rest of Ra's goons make an escape, ending the episode on this very interesting line.
You know, there might be something to this partnership business after all.
Yeah, right.
That was a great episode. I may not have liked how the villains escaped at the beginning, but from there it was a well-paced story that brought Batman back into the forefront and closed out an arc that was left open in BTAS. What more could I want? But anyway, I said that ending line was interesting since that's it for the setup. I just thought about this while writing, and like a light bulb went off in my mind. Think about it. In Batman Season 2, we met Zatanna. In Season 3, we heard the ancient tales of Jonah Hex. In TNBA, we met Etrigan the Demon. In Superman Season 1, we were introduced to the Flash. Season 2 saw Superman meet Batman for the first time, as well as introducing us to Dr. Fate and Steel. Now in this video, we have seen Orion, the Green Lantern Corps, Aquaman and Atlantis, and now Batman and Superman have teamed up again, with Superman having changed his mind in the whole team-up thing. Maybe working with other heroes isn't so bad after all. A critical point leading towards a superhero team to assemble. As I said, this episode is big since this is the very final time the Justice League is going to be hinted at. It is coming, and it's coming soon. But we just have 2 more STAS episodes to watch and review before we get there, which leads us swimmingly into the finale of Superman the Animated Series, episodes 17 and 18, Legacy. It's been really interesting to review the entirety of STAS in such a short time, especially in comparison to how long it took to get through all of BTAS, but here we are, the final stop. What's often considered the best episode of STAS. Is it my favorite? Well, let's see. No better place to start than the beginning. The episode opens with the people of Apokolips taking over a foreign planet. The tanks are back, the parademons, all of them are with these fire-breathing ground-based tanks as well. This is the kind of damage that could have been done to Earth in Apokolips Now, if not for the New Genesis Armada at the end of the episode saving the day. Tanks indiscriminately tearing through buildings, firing on anything and everything. The last of these people are completely surrounded as this armored guy blows up the whole building, tearing through survivors with his parademon army, making this leader bow down to him. It's just a brutal sight. Earth really was lucky Darkseid left. Now, who is this guy?
You've done well, son.
Thank you, Father. As you say.
What? Oh no. Darkseid's dialogue drops plenty of hints as to what's going on. Like how now Darkseid and the female Furies seem to know Superman's name is Kal-El, and that Darkseid's happy he adopted him, even throwing some real shade at Kalibak.
I chose wisely when I adopted you, Kal-El. You have honored me where others failed.
But now Darkseid has a new planet he wants Kal-El to rule over.
By the way, Father, which planet will be mine?
A wealthy but untamed world. Bringing it under your heel will be your greatest triumph. It is called Earth.
My lord, this is not going to end well. In Little Girl Lost, I said that Darkseid never does the same thing twice. In said episode, it was confirmed that he's not letting Earth go until it's under his heel. The direct approach failed in Apokolips Now, the indirect approach failed in Little Girl Lost, and now he has somehow twisted Superman into thinking he's Darkseid's son and is going to try and take over the Earth. This scene just makes your skin crawl if you've been a fan of this whole series. You just know Superman is screwed, but there's nothing you can do but watch. The scene cuts back to Earth as Superman's flying through the sky, but he looks pretty off while doing it. Cut back to the ground where Lois has to snap Clark into reality. That's because Superman has been gone, and in his place, Supergirl has been operating robots from the Fortress of Solitude to take his place as both Superman and Clark Kent, which, as the Kents themselves point out, can't go on forever. The real Clark is on Apokolips and has a nightmare about Superman attacking him, which basically means that whatever they've done to him is wearing off. Whenever that happens, he's brought to Granny Goodness for his mind to be reprogrammed, where they have entirely convinced Superman that he is from the planet of Krypton, and in its final moments, he was sent to the distant world Apokolips. They remake shots from the last son of Krypton to show how they've changed Clark's memories of his entire life. Even showing Darkseid smiling at the baby Kal-El, it just pisses you off. The dramatic irony is strong with this one. So the plan is, Superman will attack Earth, the world leaders will unite to capture and execute him, and with the Earth in such a state, even Highfather would not object to Darkseid establishing rule over such a broken world. It really is a brutal plan. Back on Earth, the robot has gone completely out of control as Supergirl has to go and stop it, and she crash lands into Lex's office as it turns out that he was the one who scrambled the robot's signal.
Superman is missing.
No, he's not. He's just been kind of busy lately.
It's more than that. I think he's gone and not coming back.
Lex knows that Superman's gone and Supergirl won't admit it, which does not help her case with Lex in the slightest bit. As a concerned citizen, Lex takes this information to his friend in the army, General Hardcastle. I brought him up earlier in this video as one of those people who really hates Superman because of his alien heritage, and evidently, the moment Superman refused Lex's offers in The Last Son of Krypton and A Little Piece of Home, Lex has been funding Hardcastle's secret program, Project Achilles, a way to kill Superman if it ever became necessary. They don't know what's going on, but they're ready. Back on Apokolips, the invasion's about to begin, but as the ultimate nail in the coffin, they're sending Clark to Earth with a Superman-themed banner. Get ready for it, folks. This is the moment this whole episode's been building towards. Let's see how it happens. Without warning, the military is attacked and decimated by the Apokolips army, and as we all know, Superman is the leader. Lex has a chat with Hardcastle as they're going to prepare for the final weapon needed to end this. Lex and Mercy don't even think Superman's actually doing this of his own free will, but hey, he's not gonna pass up a chance to kill Superman if it's here in his lap. Lois and Jimmy are covering the story, but Lois is determined to find the truth as she runs into the battlefield to find Superman. As the last episode, the writers are not going to hold back on reminding us just how proactive Lois is, as we'll see throughout this story. At the same time, Supergirl tries to stop Superman, but she doesn't last long against him. Lex arrives to give Hardcastle the weapon, a kryptonite-based toxic gas that will incapacitate Superman and Supergirl. Man, this episode is really flying by, but part 1's almost done. Superman is about to kill Supergirl, but then Lois arrives to talk him down.
Superman, stop!
Granny's spell over Superman is short-term, as was established at the beginning, and Lois ranting at him brings back his memories. But unfortunately, Hardcastle's already taken aim.
Fire!
Lois, get down!
Direct hit!
No way he could have survived that.
Now, part 1 is finished. The best thing so far is just how bad you feel for Superman while watching this. The guy has just done nothing wrong in an attempt to protect Earth, and Darkseid does in this episode what I'm going to go on record and say is the worst thing that will ever happen to this Superman. This is the end of everything as far as right now is concerned. Superman's whole life has been stolen from him as he's now going to be executed. This is how far Darkseid is willing to go to prove a point. At the same time, Lois's quick talk regaining Superman's memories entirely is a bit weak. And the episode's focus shifts to Superman in part 2, meaning we have no idea what happened with the Apokolips Armada. I mean, without Superman they have no leader, but correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no line establishing that the military defeated the parademons or that they retreated or what have you. So basically this episode's been great up until this point and is going to stay that way in part 2, but the transition from the attack on Earth to Superman in custody in part 2 is weak. But that's my only real flaw with this episode, so let's go back to how good it is in part 2. Lois finds a squad of men carrying Superman and Supergirl away as we find out what really happened to get Superman on Apokolips. On one of his trips across the galaxy that we've seen numerous times this season, Superman found a distress signal that he investigated, but it was really a trap that knocked him out as parademons brought him to Granny's mind probe, and the rest is history. Now Superman's in a cell under some red solar lamps to limit his powers. Part 1 might have been bad enough for Darkseid to do to Superman, but like I said before, now Superman is left to deal with the consequences as he's going to get one chance to explain himself before being executed.
First you declare all-out war on Earth, and now that you've lost, you'd like us to believe an alien despot was controlling your mind. How stupid do you think we are?
Darkseid's attacked Earth before. He wants this planet any way he can get it.
While Superman's story is believable enough, the problem is, there's no way to prove that Superman's mind was wiped. And the most important thing, what can Superman do to fix this mess?
Believe me, I'll do anything within my power to make it right.
To who, Superman? You betrayed us poor Earthlings, attacked us in cold blood. How would you win back our trust? Rescue a kitten from a tree?
The whole world has clearly seen what Superman is capable of if he had the desire to take over the world. They're not just gonna have a kryptonite gun ready every time. So Darkseid or not, the government just feels like Superman might be better off dead to make sure he can't do it.
I repeat, the threat has been neutralized.
That's not true. He was alive when he was taken away. Where are you holding him, and where's Supergirl?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
You didn't answer me! Answer me!
Lois gets nothing out of the military, and so she uses her father's military status to sneak into the base Superman is being held at, right in the nick of time as Lex has finished preparing a kryptonite fluid that will kill Superman and Supergirl once and for all. But before the end...
Now that I'm as normal as you, Lex, I wonder if you'd grant me one last request.
And that is...
Thank you.
filthy alien!
Lois saves Superman from execution, but before they escape, they need to save Supergirl, to which they do.
You've got some serious explaining to do.
Later. We've got to get out of here.
Superman is clearly in a weak state since the bullets hurt him too, but that's not important. They find Hamilton to ask him to save Supergirl's life, since with all the things she's been exposed to over the last 24 hours, she's gonna die if not treated immediately. But Hamilton has concerns since he's aiding 2 government fugitives.
But if I help either of you, it'd be considered an act of treason.
Hamilton!
Yes, of course. Just don't hurt me.
Good God. Hamilton has been Superman's partner in almost every way since the start of this series, but he's also seen the devastation Superman can unleash, and was just threatened by Superman. Superman was not trying to coerce him that way, he just took his anger out on Hamilton, and that's going to have massive consequences. Again, I've just ran through part 2 since it moves really quickly, but you will be on the edge of your seat while watching it. What's most important is that Superman is so mad over what's happened that he's gonna face Darkseid now. I just stated a moment ago that Superman's in a weakened state. I'm gonna go on record again and say that this is a bad idea. Not bad writing, but Superman is making a very poor decision by going after Darkseid right away, since he's expecting Superman to come, and Superman's not even close to ready. But can you blame Superman? As he himself puts it, Darkseid has tried to take over the Earth countless times, killed Dan Turpin in cold blood, Hamilton will never trust Superman again, Superman's now an outcast, and Supergirl's life is hanging in the balance. It would be an understatement to call this justified motivation, which will become a precedent going forward in the DCAU retrospective. I don't have to think these characters always make the right decisions, but then good writing is establishing believable motivation for poor decisions, and proper consequences. Superman boom tubes his way to Apokolips and burns through parademons, wrecks the female Furies, and gives Granny exactly what she has coming to her.
Sweet dreams.
If you didn't believe me when I said Superman was weak at this time, at full power, he can beat Kalibak in one hit. But now it takes 3. Not a big deal, but it sets the stage. Earlier in the season, I made a note how we never got a proper one-on-one fight between Superman and Darkseid, and now this scene is all the better for it, since we have never seen Darkseid in combat before, and if his Omega beams are anything to go off of, he's quite the powerhouse. But first and foremost, Superman is obviously pissed off, but when beating Kalibak, Darkseid's just sitting there cracking jokes.
I can't believe he's blood.
You used me.
I told you once, Superman. If you would not be my knight, you would be my pawn.
I see you're a man of your word.
I am many things, Kal-El. You couldn't begin to imagine half of them. But for now, I shall take the role of executioner.
Darkseid reminds Superman that being killed now would be a better outcome since... what? Is he gonna return to Earth and try to build up his good name? Yeah, not gonna happen. Like General Hardcastle said, what's he gonna do? Save a cat from a tree? But at the same time, Superman is not just gonna back down and finally lands a hit on Darkseid.
You dare strike me!
Did you hear how weak those punches sound? Cause I certainly did. Listen again and compare it to Darkseid's punches. Even still, Superman's not gonna give up and remembers what he's fighting for.
That's for Dan Turpin.
Who?
The good man you murdered.
Had I known one human's death would pain you so, I would have killed more.
I can't with this. This is a villain, people. It was devastating when Darkseid killed Dan Turpin, but he doesn't even remember doing it because he kills that much. Then goes on to say he would have killed more people if he knew it would make Superman upset. They don't use words like destroy or annihilate. Superman calls Darkseid a murderer, and he proudly claims they want to kill more humans. This isn't some late night Toonami or Adult Swim show. This was aired on Saturday morning.
And Gilmore I shall. Carry that agony with you to oblivion, Superman.
Now do you know why I have never tolerated It's Just for Kids? There are obviously lines, there's certain things for little kids, but I mean something like Sly 4 or Sonic Lost World or Ratchet PS4 can't just get away with any old trash. Kids entertainment can push the envelope and deliver heinous villains that do bad things and hold no regrets. It's okay. Kids will be able to handle this since it only strengthens perceptions of good and evil. Darkseid being about as evil as it gets. Blocking those Omega Beams was literally the only thing that saved Superman here. If he hadn't done that, I'm sure Superman would have died. But Darkseid's defeated, finally freeing the people of Apokolips. Except when Superman then learns that the people of Apokolips are not slaves. Well, technically they are, but they don't mind being slaves walking around in chains all day. They love Darkseid that much.
Master. Let me help you, Master.
So Superman is just screwed. He can't beat Darkseid. This is the closest he's ever come, but the people of Apokolips just won't let him kill their master.
I am many things, Kal-El, but here I am God.
But what's left for him back on Earth? As established, basically nothing. Supergirl boom tubes her way back all patched up, reminding him that they need to go home.
Let's go home.
Home.
Speaking of Earth, there's a segment on TV about whether or not Superman's to be trusted, and while Jimmy and Lois might vouch for him, the people of Metropolis, including Hamilton, are now living in fear of the Man of Steel as he could potentially ruin the whole world with the snap of a finger.
He's a traitor and a menace.
I'm locking my bedroom door at night.
Thus bringing us to the final scene, as the fans were given the moment they have waited 3 seasons to see.
If I can't trust myself, how can I win back the trust of an entire planet?
One person at a time.
And that's it. That is the note Superman the Animated Series leaves us on. If it wasn't clear before, Legacy is an incredible final episode that shakes the status quo to its core with great action, animation, voice acting, the works. There were pacing issues at the end of part 1, and for that reason I think Apokolips Now has the slight edge to Legacy, but both are the 2 best episodes of the show, as I can picture no better way for the series to end. I mean, it just gets better the more I sit here and think about it. But moreover, that was Superman the Animated Series Season 3. Need I say more? This was a fantastic season. Let's start by looking at the first 7 episodes were really high tier content with a unique feel, all the while carrying the same level of quality consistency, which is important since one of the things that affected Season 2 was how all over the map the writing and ideas were. I could watch anything from Warrior Queen to even New Kids in Town without a second thought. The season kind of stalled from there though. Episodes 9 through 14 only had 1 bad episode in it, but even then, that bad episode provided a lot of ironic entertainment that other poor DCAU episodes didn't. The back half of the season was really strong though, for all the reasons I'm sure you could tell. Superman Season 3 just pushed the boundaries of what children's animation was capable of, and I have nothing but respect for it because of that. Now, after having watched and reviewed all 18 episodes, where does this season rank amongst the other 6 seasons I've reviewed thus far? Well, the hunt has ended, since after thinking about this for a while, Superman the Animated Series Season 3 ranks at the top as the best season of the DCAU to have been made thus far. In comparison to TNBA, how come this one's the best? Well, when looking back at TNBA, I remember how it wasn't always perfect either, since my memory is a bit deceptive of this. TNBA was just so good that I forgot about episodes like The Ultimate Thrill or Double Talk. Episodes that were pretty good, but weren't much more besides that. Now, analytically speaking, it's not like Superman Season 3 has anything that's leagues and bounds better than, say, Mad Love or Old Wounds, but the best of this season is just right up there with it, and overall, it was just the most fun to watch of any season yet. The middle of the season, which I spent the least amount of time on, was still very good. I mean, no worse than Double Talk or Blind as a Bat, episodes that I liked but didn't say much about. So after having thought about it, I have no issue rewarding Superman Season 3 as the best season thus far. However, this season was not perfect in any way, as I was just saying with the middle of the season. I want to see it topped in future videos as the DCAU can and will reach maximum potential. Now with that said and done, how was Superman the Animated Series as a whole? Well, I loved it. STAS didn't far surpass BTAS like I had remembered, but that doesn't take anything away from just how enjoyable this show was to rewatch or how enjoyable that show was to rewatch. On the plus side, STAS didn't have the growing phase that BTAS did. It started off great and stayed that way from there on, and as a show, it stood out on its own with a fantastic cast of main characters and villains with phenomenal actors portraying them. I can't stress enough, I think the single thing Superman has that no other show in the DCAU does is the banter between the main characters. I loved how this show non-linearly handled the story and continuity, and above all else, I just love how nostalgic this whole show feels. I didn't grow up on STAS, but it still has that nostalgic feel whenever watching any of its episodes, from Apokolips Now all the way to Two's a Crowd. Despite not being the perfect work of art, I remember this show being, since none of the seasons were perfect and season 2 was a bit of a letdown, but still, I have nothing but respect and admiration for Superman the Animated Series and the people who worked on it. For all these reasons, I love it that ever so bit more than BTAS, which was already an amazing show to begin with. But, as one final note, like I mentioned before, Legacy shook the status quo of the DCAU, and as far as the timeline's concerned, where does that leave us? Well, Darkseid's attacks and Superman's current outcast status have proven one thing. Superman is not enough. He alone does not possess the power to protect Earth from any and all threats. I think you know what I'm getting at here, right? The only force capable of doing what I'm saying is a team of superheroes to do the job Superman can't do alone. That's right, we're done with Superman the Animated Series, and in the next video of the DCAU retrospective, we will be tackling the first season of The Justice League. Thank you all for watching. It really means a lot, and take care.
Hello?
Dude, are you seeing this?
What are you talking about?
Jay is going to review Justice League immediately after reviewing Superman. He's skipping over Batman Beyond, and he's gone on record saying he lacks any experience with the Justice League show past the first season. The references are going to go straight over his head. His viewers will not get the complete analysis.
It makes sense to review the DCAU in chronological order. Knowing Jay, I'm sure the Justice League review will be just as good as the others.
No! Think about all the facts he's had to correct during his retrospective and all the facts that he hasn't corrected. See, I thought those instances were bad enough, but this is a new low even for him. I cannot let this go on.
Wasn't the whole chair fiasco enough drama?
Not in the slightest. I'm gonna see how this plays out. But in the event it all goes south, I've got a plan.